You've had to make a value judgment in removing the film from iPlayer. So is it right you don't agree with the 500 to 1,000 artists that have said that this breaches regulations on regulatory, legal and ethical obligations because you've removed it in the first instance? So you disagree with that argument that they're making?
Well, this is a way of making this film safe, that it can be seen by everyone so they can make their own minds up. I mean, from what I've seen, there's an 11-year-old Zakaria who helps paramedics at Al-Aqsa Hospital in this film, who does that rather than staying with his family because his family haven't got any food or water. And he says he's seen 5,000 people dead. That's an 11-year-old. That's not the narrator of the movie. That is actually one of the people in the movie. Surely that's a valid voice to be heard by the BBC licence fee payer if it can be done in a safe way. Surely it's possible to edit this film so you remove the narrator, in other words, the point of contention, and you still allow the children's voices to be heard by everyone. Then the licence fee payer can see from themselves what they must.
Yeah, my question is about international stuff, actually. And I know the chair said we shouldn't make this all about the scandal over the documentary last week, but I guess there are questions to be asked. It was in Parliament on Thursday, there was an urgent question on it. So Samir Shah, you've been head of current affairs and you've also run an independent production company. It's right that, this thing didn't meet editorial standards. I just wondered what went wrong, and when it's a production company as well as the BBC, what's the chain of accountability there?
Yes, well, as you rightly point out, I have a lot of experience in current affairs documentary making and indeed to be an independent producer. So I would say that right from the start, the moment this story kicked off, Tim and I have been in constant conversation about precisely those questions. What went wrong? How and why did it go wrong? And what are we going to do about it? Those questions started literally day one following transmission of that program. And I asked Tim and his team to write a report for the board answering those questions. And there was a very speedy piece of work done where that report came to the board last Thursday. To my shock, I think that we found that there were serious failings on both sides, on the independent production side as well as on the BBC side. And in the statement that we produced from the board, following what was quite a robust, candid and open discussion addressing those questions based on the paper that was been pressed to us, that we acknowledged that there were failings on both sides, and we now need to move to a stage of what actions are we going to take. What we've now done is to ask for a further investigation, because remember, the first step was an interim report. Now we need to talk to people directly, find out why, what are their answers to it. We need to do this properly. But I am surprised. The question I would say is that the processes, the editorial guidelines and the standards that the BBC has are very good. They're very strong, and I know because I've receiving under them. So I have a worry that it wasn't so much the processes were at fault as people weren't doing their job. That's what we need to really establish. Why do? Yes, exactly.
I mean, is there also a danger that I suppose the question is the accuracy of the film. So there might also be, conversely, a danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The thing's been withdrawn from iPlayer. Obviously, transparency was lacking there. So, I mean, there's also this letter going around, I think originally 500 media professionals, now 1,000, who said that it was an overreaction. You could delete, edit or put the health warnings in, because this was a kid whose dad had that job title, and I don't know if it's in some of these regimes. I know with the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, from having constituents there, and I know from Bangladesh having roots there, that to be a doctor you had to be in that party. Right. So we don't know, did this individual have prior warning of October the 7th? Were they involved? Do you know what I mean? It could be that...
I'll ask Tim to answer some of the detail on that. But I do want to make it... I'll ask him to answer the detail. I want to make it quite clear that the idea that we see what's happening in Gaza through the eyes of children is a good documentary idea. It really is. It's a good. When I was in current affairs, my Gaza, as it were, was Northern Ireland. And if somebody said, let's look at the troubles through the eyes of children, it's a good documentary idea. I do not want anybody to think that's not the case. What we're talking about is the execution of that idea and the level of trust that took place between the BBC and the independent production company. And I'll let Tim pick up on that.
Yeah, I think, firstly I'd say nothing's more important than we're trusted. And you know, we have actually built trust over it. So you can imagine that I think there's a lot of frustration and disappointment. It's not about the BBC and people like myself, but we're very sorry to the audience because we don't want to be in a position where we have flaws in the programme making. And overall, I am proud of the way we're covering some of these polarised, fiendishly difficult events where many of our journalists, as you know, are under enormous pressure, ferocious lobbying, and it's been extremely difficult. But in this case, there are flaws. When you know, people say to me, well, you had to have external challenge. We do get external challenge. I get external challenges reported on from various institutions and other people questioning our programming. And it's appropriate. I'm editor-in-chief. And if someone says, you've got a problem here, it's quite right that I go and ask the teams and say, have we got a problem? And dig into it. In this case, we got challenges. But
organisations were
various challenges. But, well, I think overall we had it depends what you call. Sorry, I'm not being evasive. I think on the log this morning there's about 500 odd complaints about the film being biased against Israel. We had about 1,800 wanting to put the film back, but then we had some serious complaints from various parts of the, you know, we have various complaints from different people in terms of, and various organisations in terms of their concern about this programme. There were specific concerns, as you know. We've been highly transparent in my view, in terms of, and that's how I try to deal with these things, in terms of saying there was a specific question around, bear with me, around the father of the boy. And as we dug into it, we've been totally transparent, we found out that we were not told. Now, to your point, you can debate the materiality of that, you can talk about, but in my view, if you're asked a number of times and that question was not answered, and from our side, and we have fantastic teams, by the way, and I certainly think under the pressure they're under, you know, you've got to understand some of these situations, but the level of curiosity you ask, is there anything more I know? That is basics, and at the end of the day, as editor-in-chief, I have to be secure, not only editorially where the film's at, but the making of that film. And at that point, quite quickly, I lost trust in that film. Therefore, I have took the decision quite quickly to take it off iPlayer while we do this deep dive. That's what's happened.
So it could come back after editing
I'm
or
not,
something?
I'm not
questions of accuracy
I'm not
and
ruling
coercion.
anything. I'm not ruling anything out. What the chair has said is actually right. Is do I think this is a valid
was it accurate? Was there coercion involved? Those kind of things.
That is why I think we've done a good first initial bit of initial work that tells you more than enough to say tells me more than enough that there are flaws. But I want to do a forensic analysis of. There's a lot of things floating around in terms of budget, all of those things. We want to make sure we've done the forensic analysis of the process, the editorial, and do the work.
Dr. Shah, you spoke about it being a question, or asked whether it was a question of people not doing their jobs properly. Can I just ask you, is that a reflection of the staff of the BBC in general? Is it a kind of, is something fallen through the gaps between the BBC commissioners and the independent production company? Or are you talking about it reflecting BBC staff choosing to be lax when it comes to reporting of Gaza?
It's nothing about the staff in general. We're looking very precisely on this particular film and the decisions that were taken, at what point they were taken, and when and how the process of compliance took place, and whether people did or did not follow the compliance rules to the letter. And that's what we're now digging into, to find out exactly what happened, why it happened, because I know the compliance rules are really tough. we do have to comply. You don't just sign something off without interrogating it. I've done it myself, and therefore the question arises, and we need to, let's be fair, we're talking about human beings here, and they need to have a right to answer the questions, to be talked to find out, so that before the board discuss what is the appropriate action, we need to hear from everyone about it. And that's what we need to do. But it is, I would say it's confined to this program, and there's a wider question, which I can think up to, about the BBC's coverage of the Middle East in general. I think that's an important question. We've had, as Tim has said, we have loads of complaints about our coverage on specific programs or in general, and it seems to me that this warrants a proper independent review of our coverage as a whole. That takes us beyond this story. But on this story, we're examining how and why the compliance to editorial rules did not take place.
And Ofcom wrote to you yesterday on this
Yes.
matter. They basically said that they feel that they may need to step in to facilitate this investigation. Can the BBC mark their own homework on a matter as simple? Like you say yourself, trust matters.
Yes.
Trust is absolutely integral to the BBC. And actually, a film like this has huge value. But we have to be able to trust what we're seeing and understand the provenance of it. I think
Ofcom's letter, and I welcomed it. I think they asserted that it is for the BBC to investigate first, and if that's not satisfactory, Ofcom can then move in. That's the right process. Now, marking your own homework, we have literally marked our own homework on Thursday, and we came out with a very robust statement that there had been failings on our side as well as the others. So I'm not sure that the phrase marking your own homework necessarily means that we don't do the job properly. Peter Johnson, who's been tasked with doing this, did the Russell Brand review. It was an excoriating piece of work, and we marked our own homework. We do it. BBC First, as a first system of actually doing it, is not in itself a bad thing, and I think Ofcom's position is right. If they're not satisfied with the way we've conducted it, perfectly right, they have the right to investigate further. But let us do our job. We will do our job, and I will ask the committee here to trust me. The board is very exercised about this, seriously exercised about it, and we will get to the bottom of this, and we'll take the appropriate actions.
James. Hold on, just one. Yeah, go on, Ripple.
There could be questions around the whole coverage of this war. Is that within the remit of the Peter Johnson inquiry?
No, sorry.
I mean,
this is a separate.
I think there should be scope.
Well, no, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
Stuff about from day one when. Was it the ambassador or his head of mission, because it's not an actual country, Dr. Zomlot was on TV, and the question was always, do you condemn Hamas? People have evaluated these and measured.
Let me be clear about what I'm saying. There's a piece of work to do with this particular film, Gaza. I think there's a very important piece of work to do about the way the BBC has covered the wider story of the Middle East conflict. That needs to be done independently. We call it a thematic review. We've done one on tax and spend, where Andrew Dilnot was the lead figure. We've done one on migration, which I was part of before I took up the post. And I think this is such an important topic that I feel very strongly that this should be the next one we study. And it should take in, because please do understand, as Tim said, we have been, we get a lot of complaints and accused about all our comes from all sides. It's not just comes from one side, it comes from all sides. So we do need an independent review of how well we've done this. Have we done it impartially? And I think that's quite a big piece of work, and wants to be done.
Okay, we've got the message. Thank you, James.
You've had to make a value judgment in removing the film from iPlayer. So is it right you don't agree with the 500 to 1,000 artists that have said that this breaches regulations on regulatory, legal and ethical obligations because you've removed it in the first instance? So you disagree with that argument that they're making?
Well, this one to me, and it was a very difficult decision.
Okay.
because I think representing some of the views, this is stories we want to tell, and this is a very hard situation for us. Bear with me. So, and also we have got a rich and important current affairs history in this area where we've got programmes we're very proud of. And it's worth saying this documentary maker has got a great reputation of making some fantastic documentaries. The issue, I don't think we're in breach of anything, is editor-in-chief, very simply, if I can't trust the programme, it's nothing to do with one side or the other. And this is where it's being misrepresented. It really is. And by the way, if you think we bow to lobbies from either side, come and spend a day with me. We don't. We try and navigate a course sensibly, rationally, based on fair, balanced journalism. And everyone has a view on it. What we did, and I did, and it was a very tough decision, was to say, at the moment, looking people in the eye, can we trust this film? In terms of how it was made, the information we've got, and that's why we made the decision. It's a simple decision in that regard.
But why is it a retrospective decision?
Because we had new information.
But the BBC, according to, to show some even-handedness on questioning wise, the BBC repeatedly raised concerns about the child's family links to Hamas. I mean, I would again, that's not marking homework. That's credit to the independence of the news organisations.
Absolutely.
But why weren't those suspicions not properly investigated or reported? There is a requirement under Section 19 of the Terrorism Act to do so, and shouldn't the counter-terrorism police now be investigating whether BBC funds have reached Hamas, either through payment to the father or the sister, as I understand, has also received money?
Yeah, let's segment I need to segment the issues there slightly, which is that first decision was not related. Payments were not the thing being debated at that point. It was a simple fact of the relationship. Yeah. So there was nothing at that point. I did not need information on the payments. It was enough to say that we had asked about. Remember, the question was, is there a relationship with Hamas in any way? And to the point, you can talk about the looseness of the relationship, but that should have been declared. Yeah. And to your point, transparency was lacking. Exactly right. And at that point, I look people in the eye and say, can we trust this film at this point? Not is it a valid area of journalistic endeavour. It's not a criticism of the wider newsroom. It is absolutely, can we trust this programme? That's when we take it off iPlayer. Okay. Then you say, okay, let's have a look. Let's look in detail at this. Let's look at the funding. Now, it's worth saying that, just to be utterly clear, the BBC has only made, as I understand it, I want to make sure that I'm safe, bluntly, because we need to do this deep investigation, but as I understand it today, the BBC's only made one payment, which was for a licence fee to the programme maker, the independent, to make the film. The initial assessment of the economics, and we need to do the detailed work, showed that there was a small payment to the sister. Because the boy, and it's totally normal payment, which is the boy recorded the narration and went to a studio to do it. Okay? Now we just need to understand how that works. We are very, very clear about our obligations in terms of the law and what parties we have to. I don't want to get into too much detail, as you would understand, but we do not need any prodding. My view is absolutely clear. It's if we've got obligations to make sure everyone is aware. And by the way, what we're aware of is in the paperwork that we've issued in our statement, and absolutely everyone should be aware of that, including any authorities that need to be. We don't need, I mean, that's absolute transparency. That's where we are.
Do you think you will the scope of your inquiry confirm if the money paid for the documentary ended up with Hamas?
Part of the work is to do a forensic analysis of exactly what happened to the money. Yeah.
But are you asking that question?
Of course. Of
Okay.
course. And it's
So
worth saying
the
independent production company, to represent them fairly, they have written to us very clearly that they say no money has gone to Hamas. But we absolutely have to do that work, and the answer is yes, of course. As far as you can go. I mean,
it's fair to assume if the family of a senior Hamas leader is paid, that money goes into the.
Let's deal with the facts. Assuming anything at this point, I'm telling you the facts I know, and that's what I can stand on. And I've told you what I know, which is a limited amount of money was paid to the sister, is what I am being told at this point.
And given this situation, referring back to my former question, if trust is of the issue here, and people are calling into question whether the BBC can be trusted on this issue, is the BBC the right person to be doing that inquiry?
Well, when you think the review we'll be doing is, I think we have a very good process. And the first thing is, I have fast-tracked the review out of news, which is a really important point, to Peter Johnson, who has outstanding credentials, by the way. He ran BBC Northern Ireland, which I would say requires a degree of navigating the current affairs course that is quite demanding. Peter has an outstanding track record reporting directly to me, and we've fast-tracked that to what we call stage 2, sorry for technicalities, to the ECU. That then is right that he does a full report. And then we've got Ofcom. We have an independent regulator as per their letter, so exactly as their letter outlines. So I believe that is a proportionate and right response. Separately, as the chair has said, and this is a matter for him and the board, is we do have thematic reviews which stretch beyond one particular affair, because this does then leak into bigger allegations around the BBC's coverage, of which, to earlier points, we have vociferous views on either side of this conflict, vociferous views.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that I would welcome, it's absolutely right that as a public service broadcaster, we have independent oversight against it. I mean, part of what I've tried to do for the BBC is be a guardian of true impartiality through thick and thin, and that requires being completely transparent. So I think there is the right moment. Being blunt, I think the challenge is often the time you do that in, if you've got journalists in the field and all those questions. But we're absolutely committed. The board have been very clear with me that they want to have that independent review, and I welcome it.
Okay, Damien, and then Paul.
Thank you. Dr. Shah, you said the board is very exercised about this, and I'm not surprised. I mean, from the point of view of the BBC's reputation, this is awful, and today more than ever for a similar case, if it had happened in the past. I mean, you yourself talked about the distinction between opinionated news and fact-based news. I think later in this session we may come on to talk about the different sources that people now self-select their news from, and the brand flattening effect. And you've both talked about there being failings both at the BBC and at the independent production company. The failings at the independent production company matter not to the people of Britain. I think they're called Hoyo. Brand awareness in Britain of Hoyo, 0. Brand awareness of the BBC, close to 100%. It is with you. You are the trusted source. So my question is, given that Hamas are in administration in Gaza, I mean, presumably things that happen there have their say-so, regardless of the identity of the father of this child who was involved. And therefore there must have been a whole series of questions. The question really is, did you have questions that were unanswered, or did you have questions that were answered incorrectly by the production company? And in any event, given the sensitivity of the situation and given the nature of administrative control of Gaza, surely on the precautionary principle, until you had full comfort on those types of questions, the thing should not have been aired in the first place.
Are you asking me to answer
I'm
that?
asking either of you.
But let me first of all agree with you that this is a really, really bad moment. What's been revealed goes to the heart, is a dagger to the heart of the BBC's claim to be impartial and to be trustworthy, which is why I and the board are determined to answer the questions you've just asked, because that's what we're trying to do here. Who did know what? And you make a very good point about the film itself, and slightly addresses Tim's point about losing trust in the content of what we saw because of what you've just said. This is why we need to do a proper deep dive into the mechanics of the filmmaking itself. Now, my experience is in Gaza, but I know that when we've made films in Northern Ireland, we had to be very careful about the circumstances in which the terrorist organizations worked and how they controlled things and what we did. Really important. So I think what you're asking is absolutely right, and what I want to reassure the committee is this is exactly why Tim is deep diving into this, because we will find this out. And you're quite right. In terms of it's the BBC that needs to come out of this. Whatever happens to the independent production company, what matters is we need to restore trust in the BBC. And we need to get to the bottom of this so that we can begin that process.
You said there are unanswered questions. So what we want to know is, was that because the questions were not comprehensive enough and not followed up effectively, or was it an active deception by this production company on their part to give you misleading answers?
I've got no evidence of the latter, but that's part of what we need to do in the review.
So as it stands, that's still a question?
Absolutely. Well, we just need to get into the detail of exactly why those questions weren't answered.
But isn't it important as well, I mean, to answer Rupert's point earlier, is there a way of making this film safe, that it can be seen by everyone so they can make their own minds up? I mean, from what I've seen, there's an 11-year-old Zakaria who helps paramedics at Al-Aqsa Hospital in this film, who does that rather than staying with his family because his family haven't got any food or water. And he says he's seen 5,000 people dead. That's an 11-year-old. That's not the narrator of the movie. That is actually one of the people in the movie. Surely that's a valid voice to be heard by the BBC licence fee payer if it can be done in a safe way. Surely it's possible to edit this film so you remove the narrator, in other words, the point of contention, and you still allow the children's voices to be heard by everyone. Then the licence fee payer can see from themselves what they make of it.
Certainly we, as I said right at the front, there was absolutely legitimate journalism to be done here, and the voices of those children and children in Gaza is absolutely something we need to hear. And that's what makes it, frankly, frustrating to where we are. You're going to get the same answer from me because it's appropriate, which is we need to do the work and understand the questions and then make that decision. There are clearly considerations here, and we've got to do our work calmly in the midst of, as I say, ferocious noise around us, by the way. I just want to say one thing, which is I just want to reinforce that the vast majority of our journalists are doing a tremendous job. But we're only as good in this job as, the weakest link, as it were. And this is damaging, but I do want to say that overall trust in BBC News, and we've seen some, it remains very high. We've grown it over the last year. So it's important we're not losing all context here. This was a serious failing, but we have trust numbers that we're very proud of. We're the most trusted brand in the world. And part of what we do to earn that trust, and believe me, it's never an easy day, is actually be highly transparent and go through enormous processes when we fail like this to show how we're going to fix it, and we're very transparent about that. And I think that is part of our process.
Very quickly, and then
point.
moving on to Paul.
I don't know if it's a view I share it with Paul, but personally, if to conclude on this is to redact the original programme, I don't support that. I think in the interest of transparency, we should see the thing as it was supposed to be and how it went out initially. You could, of course, self-redact and choose to emphasise and hear different aspects of that testimony, and I absolutely concur with Dr. Shah's point about the validity of seeing this war through a Gazan child or indeed an Israeli child, and I look forward to that documentary being commissioned. But I don't think this is about redacting.
It is about, sorry, it's really important. I agree with the thrust of that. It is about whether something meets our editorial guidelines and our standards. End of.
Yeah.
It's not about a position on either side. It is about whether it meets our editorial standards. And part of that is the making of the programme, not just what's on air. And we need to go through that work.
Good, we need to make some progress now. Back to Rupert, please.
Sorry, it made me think, would you ever do a documentary? I think Al Jazeera, I've not seen it, but I've been told about it, did one with body cams of IDF soldiers, of some of the things that they captured.
There's not an area of scope which I say we wouldn't make a documentary of it. It's a question of what the editorial controls. It doesn't look like the easiest compliance journey, that one, but I think we would absolutely... We report without fear or favour, and we want to get to the truth. So the answer is we'll look at any proposal, or our journalists are out there looking at those kind of... the issue is where editorial control sits, and it's worth saying part of the challenge is here, obviously, journalists on the ground in Gaza and what access we've got, making sure we're not being minded, all those things are really fair concerns. So it just depends on the situation.
And I do tend to think that international news is often a bit flavour of the month. So we're talking about this at great length. Yesterday, I think there was an aid blockade in Gaza. That doesn't seem to have been on the evening news yesterday. I heard it on the Today programme in the morning. It's very Ukraine at the moment.
I think we're doing a great job on our coverage, and I think there was appropriate prominence, if I may.
And so, for example, you put me in touch with BBC Bangla. I asked when I came back, could I go on Dateline UK and describe that? The programme's been axed. So I do feel there's a shrinking space for international news, the way that you've restructured your news channels and things. But look, my last one was really about domestic political bias, and you know that I've questioned you on this before. I think my point is really, when politicians appear, if we go on TV, we're captioned with our party label, and that is transparent and clear. But on some of your panels, I know you always say that we've got a team in Question Time who's scrupulously fair about this, but we know from not just Question Time, any questions, Politics Live or Daily Politics, whatever it's called, you often get these right-wing Tufton Street think tank people, and that's not totally clear. Or you get owners of right-wing print media. The print media in this country, again, is shrinking. Every day you do the papers, you hold up the headlines, 70% of those are right-wing conglomerates, Murdoch, the other one, whatever it's called, the Rothermere one, whatever it's called. So, sorry, I can see you smirking, Tim. Is this amusing?
You've got journalists in the room. I just keep going. Apologies.
If I've been
it was just a minor surreal moment. Apologies.
No, but for example, okay, we have a working population in this country of 33 million. 6.5 million of those are trade unionists. I raised this last time. Why do we not have trade union leaders? That is 20% of our workforce. Those people are absent. We know that there is the Spectator-funded GB News. Often licence payer money is used to create these culture war type scenarios where you take contributors from GB News, give them a platform on your panel shows. When can we have a bit more balance on your panel shows? Ofcom says in a modern democracy, people should have access, citizens should have access to a range of views, and it seems very skewed to the right.
I think we're working extremely hard. I thought you might ask me about Question Time, and I asked in the new series where we are. Labour 17, Conservative 17, Lib Dems 8, Reform 3.
It's the non-party people
bear with me, if I may. Loosely, people of the left, if that is a descriptor that still holds, or people of the right, 11 each, and so-called neutral 7. I can provide the data. We're working extremely hard on this, and I think our record speaks for itself.